بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. قال الصادق عليه السلام ليس منا من لم يملك نفسه عند غضبه. Illuminate your hearts and minds with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Speaking in general, if we would look at the facts, one's impression can lead to an overall look to their affiliates, family members, and who they hang around with. For example, if my friend were to be a person that uses foul language, I would take it as in a general perspective. Some might be very, very detailed, like, no, maybe his parents are like this, maybe he has bad friends, but I'm speaking in general. And this generality is very important. Speaking in general, if my friend who is very foul mouthed, he speaks in bad ways, cursing, slandering, was to be seen or recognized by another person, they would look at him and try to see how he is, try to, from his impression that he leaves, try to get a recognition of what his family is like. They would come to the conclusion that this person lives in a household which there is no respect in. Very general. And now it's the same for every single one of us. Every single one of us leaves an impression on those who see us, look at us, leave an impression on our family members, our affiliates, and those who we are in contact with. Now, one detail that was brought up earlier is that speaking in general. Us, as the Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt, those who believe in the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the orders of the Quran, have to know that in our sect, in our belief, there are many of those who take a general viewpoint on us. Very generally, they don't think exactly about how this bad apple, for example, is doing this specifically. But no, it's the whole entire religion that's like this. And so we should be aware that our actions have an impact on the impression that the general world or how everyone else around views us as. Now, it's interesting how in an article that I've come upon by, which states that an internet service company by the name of SoftBanks has started using AI to get rid of the emotions that are on the voice of customers. The reason being that the customers that would come by, not all of them, some of them, would come by and try to get in contact with the operators, would sometimes start screaming, shouting, raging, having bad mouth, being foul mouthed, slandering the operators to such an extent which it would lead the operators or those who would be of service to the customers with mental strain. And so what did it result in this SoftBanks company doing? It made them have no choice but to use AI, artificial intelligence, as a device or tool to get rid of any emotion, shouting or screaming that the customers might show. Now, what does this have to do with us showing ourselves and having an impact on other people's views and perspectives of us, of Shi'ism? We have to take into consideration that if any one of us were to be bad-tempered, with no patience, definitely our intolerance will leave an impression on every single one of those who view us from the outside. Now, in a hadith from the Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he says that man kaffa ghadabahu an nas kaffa Allahu anhu adhab yawm al-qiyamah. Let's translate one by one. Man kaffa ghadabahu anin nas. Whosoever moderates or controls their anger and rage from others, kaffa Allahu anhu adhaba yawm al-qiyamah. Allah will keep him protected and away from the torments and tortures of the day of judgment. This is one of the effects of controlling our anger towards others. We have been going over a hadith these past few weeks from Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he brings the characteristics and traits of the Shias. He says, "الشيعتنا المتباذلون في ولايتنا المتحابون في مودتنا المتزاورون في مودتنا." And we have been going over this part now. الذين إن غضبوا لم يظلموا. This lesson that was brought. Those who, if they are angry, frustrated, they don't lash out and they don't act upon their rage. So, as we have said, having anger, lashing out on others, showing our rage through our physical interactions can lead into others who are viewing us from the outside to think that the religion in general is something very bad. It's something only full of oppression, hatred, anger. Islam was created by the sword. Islam was this. Everyone's in anger. It's the exact opposite. It's just a few bad apples that are there. Now, we can see that showing or acting upon one's rage and anger has such a bad effect that makes one person fall off the eyes of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And the hadith which was recited at the beginning, which was narrated at the beginning, one of the quotes narrated from the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, which says that "Man lam laysa minna man lam yumlik nafsahu 'inda ghadabih." Whosoever does not control his anger, his rage, is not from us, the Ahlul Bayt, not from our Shi'as. They are not from us, our followers. Correct. We have seen up until now through different various proofs and narrations that one's rage should never be shown, one's anger should never be portrayed. For if doing this, it'll have a bad impression not only on myself, but on the religion in its entirety. Now this is how we will be transitioning to our topic and subject which will be concerning us tonight. In the different narrations or the quotings that have been brought of the physical attributes of the Prophet, peace be upon him, it has been brought that the Prophet himself had a vein that was in between his forehead. And this vein would swell up whenever the Prophet was angry. Subhanallah. The Prophet, we believe that the Prophet is an infallible human being. Allah created him without any sin and he will be without any sin. Is it possible for the Prophet to be angered and enraged? Would he show out his rage? The Ahlul Bayt themselves are saying control your anger in front of others. But in the narrations or quotings that have been brought, the Prophet himself, whenever he would get angry, he had a vein that would swell up. And when he was angry, he had a face that when anyone looked at him, they would not recognize that this was the Prophet to begin with. How can this be? One thing has to be mentioned. Anger or ghadab in itself is not prohibited. What does this mean? When I am angry, when I am in rage, this rage in itself is not something that is disliked, but the way that this rage is used. Whenever I am angry and I use my anger to oppress others, use my rage to lash out on others, this is anger in itself being used for wrong. But anger in itself being used for religion, for the religious needs, is something that is even recommended. The Prophet himself, whenever an affair would come up that would concern religion, and would be of a problem, he himself would be angered at this problem and would try to solve it with the best way he could. So, we can see here that there are two types of angers, and anger in itself is not prohibited. Just like lying, right? Lying. How could this be? We have lying that can be used for good and lying that can be used for bad. Lying to deceive others and lying for the benefit and to act upon religion. For example, taqiyya. My life is in danger, and so I have to lie. But if I use lying to deceive others, then this itself is haram. But the act of lying in itself, in its core, it's bad or good depending on how it's used. When we say that anger, if it's used for religious matters, it is good. The Prophet himself would be angered at situations which there was a problem in the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One question: does being enraged, frustration, or anger for religion have an extent, or is it without any boundaries? We can see the answer brought in a very interesting story from one of the most respected scholars, a person by the name of Haj Mullah Aghajan. An interesting name. He says that one time he had been invited by the Imam Mahdi, in a dream, or however it was. And when he went to visit him, he had gathered around some of his students, some of his colleagues, friends, those who he trusted. Among them, one of his friends, familiars, had invited another person. Now, somehow, in some sort of way, in a miraculous way, he was informed that this person who was invited was among the Jews. And he came to spy on them and see the Imam Mahdi and use this information against Imam Mahdi. So he was angry, of course. This was the Imam Mahdi. He shouldn't have any spies on him. He shouldn't have anyone trying to take away his privacy, looking at him, using the information against him. So what he did was, with anger and rage, pushed this man out of the room or the dorm that they had reserved for the coming of the Imam Mahdi. And they pushed him, and he pushed him out with such rage and anger. Now, of course, being angry that a person would try to misuse the presence of the Imam Mahdi for wrong is definitely needing of us to be a bit frustrated and angry. But to use it and lash out in such a way to the extent where my anger is showed in a very bad way is disliked. Why? Because later on in this story, he had waited with those who were around him. But after a while, he asked, would the Imam Mahdi not come to himself? And the people who were around him, the people who had gathered, had all said that the Imam Mahdi was there. He had come. He was in the door. He was right beside the window or behind the entrance. But when he saw that Haj Mullah Aghajan had pushed the Jew out with such fury and rage, the Imam Mahdi left. It's not that the Imam Mahdi hated him for doing this. It's that because every type of rage or anger should be moderated to a balanced level. Now, to the hadith which has been brought of the characteristics of the Shia, there is a continuation which we will be going over in the future nights, inshallah. May Allah, inshallah, give us the tawfiq, success of becoming among the true Shias of the Ahlul Bayt, and may we all be alim and amil to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin.